All right, as you can see, our boat is all prepped for install. We've begun by uninstalling the prior existing Lenco system on the boat. Our new system will fit right in this pocket here with geometry that matches the old system. The pocket is cleaned and prepped and ready for installation. One of the first steps in the installation of the trim tab blades and actuators is to rough fit the system to the transom of the boat. In this case, we're actually dealing with the trim tab pocket, so this blade is going to sit relatively flush to the running surface. However, on many boats, we have a recommended offset from the running surface. This is fully described in our installation manual. On this boat, as we're replacing pre-existing blades, we have the holes already drilled in the transom, so it'll be nice and easy to fit this right up in the pocket. Prior to your installation, you'll also want to determine if your trim tab set has a specific port or starboard blade. Now we're applying a durable marine sealant for use below the waterline to the screw holes. Now we're going to install the blade and fasten it to the boat. Be mindful not to over torque the screws during this process. You want the blade to fit nice and snug against the boat, but without over tightening. The number 3 Phillips bit is the size necessary for our blade mounting screws. Now we're going to connect the lower bracket to the blade using the supplied screws. These also have pre-applied Loctite on them, a thread locker. You'll also notice that our bracket has a 3-hole pattern. This will match the 3-hole pattern on Lenco blades. To tighten down the bracket, we're also using that same number 3 Phillips bit. Now we're going to mount the SD Pro actuator to the lower bracket. We're going to use our 5/16 hex head and the supplied longer bolt in the kit. Now we're going to pre-fit the upper bracket to the actuator and to the transom so we can determine what we call the trailing angle of the blade.
So at this point, we're going to just pre-fit the upper bracket to the actuator. We're not going to tighten it down at this point, because at this point what we're doing is we're trying to find the running angle of the tab. Ryan, if you can hold that.
Okay, now we're setting the trailing edge of the blade. On this boat, it's actually going to be a 1/4 inch up from the running surface due to the geometry of the pocket. Once we set this trailing edge, that will determine where the upper mounting bracket holes go to actually fasten the bracket to the boat. Okay, now that we have our trailing edge all set and measured out, we are going to do an outline of the top bracket with a pencil. While marking out the top bracket, it's important not to torque the actuator too hard to one side or the other and let it naturally rest against the transom. Before drilling the upper bracket holes, we want to check to make sure there's no obstructions behind or anything that we could potentially hit with the drill bit. On this boat, it's nice and easy because we have a pie plate right here.
Okay, so now that we have our holes mapped out and where they need to be for the upper bracket, we're going to go ahead and drill the 4 holes on the bracket itself where the mounting screws go with a 3/16 drill bit. For the center hole where the cable passes through, we're going to use a 7/16.
Okay, now we're going to install the upper bracket in the system. So first we're going to pass the wire through the front of the upper bracket. And then we have our gland seal. This will then get installed on the wire with the tapered end, the smaller tapered end, resting in the bracket. Now we're passing the wire loom through the hull, and that's going to go through the larger center hole that we've drilled in the bracket. All right, we're going to use the same marine sealant for use above and below waterline that we used on the blade for the top bracket as well. We're going to seal the wire pass-through holes and all the screw holes to keep everything nice and watertight. We're also applying a bead of sealant around the gland seal. Now we're going to snug everything up to the transom and then fasten the bracket to the transom itself using the same screws that we used for the blade and the same number 3 Phillips bit. In doing this as well, you want to ensure that there is some sufficient slack for the wire when the actuator articulates, but at the same time you don't want to make it too loose to where there's too much slop. All right, and then as the last step to getting this actuator installed, we are going to put the top bolt and nut in. The nut will actually set into the bracket to hold it in place. And then when you slide the bolt in, just be mindful that you will need to get a tool on the other side. So in a pocket like this, you want to make sure that you slide it in from the side that has better access to get the tool in to tighten the bolt down. And now that the port side actuator and blade have been installed, we're going to repeat the process on the starboard side.